Hi, everybody. We appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. We're going to do something a little bit different today. We've got Marty WAGAR with us. Say hi, Marty, so you come up on the screen so everybody can see you. Uh,
I'm here.
right now, he can't say hi because one of our screens is frozen. So we're having a couple of technical issues this morning, but we're going to go ahead and do this anyway. So, Marty, go ahead and say hi and give us your CV so everybody knows where you're coming from, that everybody knows your qualifications, and then we're going to get into two issues. And just so everybody knows, you and I are friends, and we've talked about this, but we might there might be some raised blood pressure today over what we're going to talk about. So, Marty, before I get into the first issue, go ahead and give us your CV.
Yeah. Good morning. I actually started in the appraisal business in the mid 70s. And for 35 years, ended up doing appraisals like most of the residential appraisers do today. Finished up after my 35 years, went to work as a chief appraiser. Started in AMC, done pretty much everything in terms of understanding what Fannie Mae is going through, dealing with collateral underwriter. I'm designated through the ASA. I have an ASA. I'm actually a realtor emeritus as well, because back when I started, and Tim, when you started, in order to be an appraiser, all you had to have was a real estate license. You didn't have to have licensing. So I am still in private practice, slowing down, doing some teaching, trying to understand where the business is going and why. So it's one of those, I guess, addictions. I just can't let it go. I see somebody do something and I say, well, wait a minute, we did that in 1980 and it didn't work then. We did it again in 07, 08, and that was the reason we got there. So that's kind of the reason that I can't sit down and shut up.
And we're glad you can't. Now, bring us up to speed on your service to the good folks in the state of Michigan.
Well, in Michigan, I did leave that out through just before COVID. Actually, I was on the appraisal board for 3 years and sat on probably a dozen cases. So you might say I have a foot in just about all aspects of what we have. Thank you for reminding me.
And then you also, because of your realtor status, you also serve on one of NAR's committees. Which committee is that?
I do, thank you. I have for the last 10 years bounced back and forth between the Conventional Finance Committee and the Real Property Valuation Committee. Next year, in fact, I was appointed to begin in May on the Real Property Valuation Committee. And hopefully, there's some interest in our committee. There is some interest in addressing some of the lending issues going on today.
Okay. We're not going to have time today to get into Sitzer Burnett and NAR's position on Sitzer Burnett and what appraisers think of Sitzer Burnett. That's going to be for another time. But let's get started in this one now. Uh, uh, I make this disclaimer. There's no script to this. We're winging this, but yet we have traded talking points, so that we know what we're going to cover. All right. So here's the first talking point. And I'm addressing this question directly to you, and then you can address it back to me. Okay, Marty, which is more important for an appraiser's professional success? A deep knowledge of appraisal theory and practice, or the appraiser's ability to execute the client's request quickly, credibly, and on budget? What do you think? Which of those two is the more important? And
It's interesting. It's an interesting question. One, as I said on the appraisal board, you deal with every day. You completed the appraisal. Did you complete it because it's the same one you've done before? Do you have any deep knowledge of what you did? Actually, my belief in the the mortgage appraiser today, it's both. When you get in front of the board, you better have a knowledge of theory and practice and why you did what you did. And from a business standpoint, and your second statement is really a business standpoint, how can I work with an AMC, for instance, turn something around in 2 days for a lower fee and stay in business and still do what I want to do? This is it's not an unfair question. It's a good question, but it kind of makes you see why the profession is pulling at each other. FHFA, Fannie Mae likes to see us now use multiple regression. They like to see proof. They like to see you spend time developing your adjustments. On the other hand, you have the people that you work for. I want to say the clients, but they're actually not clients, but the AMCs asking you to, well, you can do that, but just do it fast. So my answer to your question is actually both. Does it weight 60-40? But one is business and certainly one is practice. I'd kind of like to hear your answer to that, since
Okay.
you wrote the question.
Let me completely obfuscate the matter. All right. The appraiser, AMC gets in touch with the appraiser, bid on this job, or excuse me, I'm sorry. The AMC gets in touch with the appraiser and says, "Okay, we want you to appraise 1, 2, 3, 4 Elm Street. We need it today's Thursday. We got to have it back on our noon on Saturday, and we will pay you the kingly sum of $375." And the appraiser says, "Okay," and takes it. Now, the appraiser has basically said, "All right, I I can't put any more time. I can't put any more effort. I can't put any more of my resources in here once I hit that $375 level, or whatever it is the appraiser accepts. It might be 275, it might be $800. But at that point, the appraiser, the wells is run dry. Okay. But Marty, let's face it. How often does an appraiser get into a situation where they've used up $375 with the time, effort, resources, etc., and the appraisal's still not done? So the appraiser has to cut corners. The appraiser has to say, "Well, okay, I'm just going to assume that there aren't any sea monsters in the basement because I don't have time to go do that research." Okay, fine. But in doing that, in the part about the appraiser's ability to execute the client's request quickly, credibly, and on budget, is not the appraiser shooting him or herself in the foot ethically, taking on that kind of well, I'm going to say it, a dumbass fee uh, for a job with a 2-day turnaround time?
Well, it's interesting because the first case I had on the board was exactly this. The appraiser came to the state with multiple obvious shortcuts and not a thorough knowledge of what he or she was doing. But at the end of the day, by the time I finished listening, my next question is, why didn't you just turn it down? Because you'd been better off. It was never, it is never an excuse you want to take to the state that say, well, this was a rush and I had to get it done. That is certainly no excuse. And certainly you don't take to the state, well, they only paid me, $275. This is what they were going to get. The third case I had was an exterior only. And the appraiser mentioned, well, what they expect, it was an exterior only. And USPAP says clearly what we expect for your inspection. You're not allowed to guess, and if you have to guess, it means that it should have been upgraded to an interior inspection. So it is a conundrum when you look at what it is that we have to do for USPAP and what's being requested of us. My conversation with a couple of different clients when I was I was chief appraiser for a mortgage company, and we had the meetings, and they were complaining about getting substandard work. And when you dissect, how do you order your appraisals? Well, we bid for them. Well, that if I'm going to look for an appraiser, maybe that's not the best way to find one. If I'm going to look for an appraiser, maybe I'm not going to set my sights on the lowest fee I can get and the lowest fee and turnaround time. So it is a conundrum. Not all AMCs do that. Not all AMCs are like that. But certainly the scenario comes around where you end up in front of the state because you had 2 days to appraise a $975,000 home in Central Florida, or on an inland coastal waterway, and you didn't have the time to look to find out if the intercoastal waterway supported Gulf traffic or it didn't. And that's a problem. That's something you have to do. So it falls over to business practice to say, is that something I can do? And so I have a deep knowledge and I understand the theory and practice, but I can't execute in the time that you've given me to do this. So one of the classes that I haven't taught for a while, but I taught, I make the statement, sometimes the best appraisal you do is the one you don't. And it is knowing when to close the door and say, I can't do what I need to do for what you want me to do it for. Make sense?
Oh, all right. Let's look at this from a little bit different direction. Okay, the AMC calls you up and says we got $375 or whatever, 275 or 650, whatever it is, and we need this appraisal done. Knowing full well, the AMC knows full well that's a low fee. Isn't the AMC purposely buying a lousy appraisal?
That goes back to my conversation with I think she was, I'm not sure she was a chief appraiser, but she was in charge of ordering appraisals for a large, very large uh, company. And it was for the Eastern Seaboard, as I recall. And that was the question I asked her when she was complaining about getting substandard work, getting a lot of boilerplate, not really getting a clear understanding, and frankly, not getting very, very good service. And the first thing I asked her is what their traditional appraisal fee was. And it was 30 or 40% below what was published for what is normal in the company. So when I was at NAR and we were in a room with 300 or 400 appraisers, there was a question asked when FHA was complaining that they were saying they did not see a reduction in the appraisers because they were all still on their roster. But when you asked 400 appraisers in a room how many worked for FHA, only half of them raised their hand. So while you had 400 appraisers on the roster, only 200 wanted to work for FHA. Conversely, the same thing was asked for AMCs. How many work for AMCs? And out of the 400 appraisers, only half of them raised their hand. So at one point when you go shopping, it's like going to McDonald's and asking your burger to be medium well. It's a scenario that's just not going to work. So sometimes you shoot yourself in the foot before you start. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that is the answer to your question is yes. Many times when you bid an appraisal, you're saying that the criteria for my ordering this is either to get a very quick turnaround time or a low fee. And that's probably, if that's two legs of the stool, it's certainly not the third. When I started the AMC back when I started it and ran it for 2 years, we designed the system to try and put the right appraiser with the right property and let the fee fall where it needed to. The business practice of AMCs is daunting. I give you that.
Okay, let's look at the first part of this question. First part says, which is more important for an appraiser's professional success, a deep knowledge of appraisal theory and practice or the other stuff? Okay, let's talk about a deep knowledge of appraisal theory and practice. So an appraiser has a deep knowledge of appraisal theory and practice. And then the appraiser gets this bid from the AMC, and it gets this incredibly stupid fee offer. And so the appraiser goes, wait a minute, I know how long this is going to take. I know the challenges I'm going to run into here. This is not something I can whip out in 2 days. So why is the potential client offering me such a minimal amount of money? So the question that to me that raises would be, why am I dealing with clients who treat me so poorly? And that to me should raise the question, oh, maybe I need new clients, which raises the issue, well, how much marketing am I doing? And the answer is, if the appraiser is typical, the answer is none. So when we get back to the question, which is more important for an appraiser's professional success, a deep knowledge of appraisal theory and practice, or blah, 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 aren't we basically saying that when the appraiser knows what to do in any given appraisal situation and how to execute on that knowledge, that the appraiser should not be taking these silly jobs for these silly fees?
Yeah. And the answer to that is yes. You build a business practice. The second part is credibly and on budget. How much money? How much money do you need? Do I cut the job short? If you want a roof on your home, do you pick a 10-year roof, 15-year roof, a 20 or 30? You're going to pay all the difference. Chances are the people who are putting on the 10-year roofs are probably not the cream of the crop. They're not the designated appraisers. They are not the ones with a lot of time in the business. We have some, because you and I both go back to the 70s, and I go back and started residential in the 70s. We were taught in the 70s, our job description in the 70s and 80s was entirely different than it is today. They're asking for the same answers, but at the end of the day, you and I joke. There's an old line on Saturday Night Live that says, "Well, wait a minute. I was told there would be no math." And when I finished my 101, and I was taught about paired sales, and you extract your adjustments from the market, and that quickly morphed into, well, I got 4 sales. One has a fireplace, one doesn't. I take away everything and leave only the fireplace, and theoretically that is the difference. How often practically that happens? It was almost non-existent. But back in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have the technology. The technology was not there for for analysis, at least even for the normal fee, because your average turnaround time in the 70s and 80s was not much more than it is today, maybe 7 business days. But you still had to build a business practice. How many of these can I do? And being on the state board for as long as I was, almost every case, without fail, dealt with that's not fair. Probably 8 out of 10 cases where the appraiser was trying to meet a business model that was not achievable based on what you had to do the appraisal. The other 20% were they just didn't understand. They failed in the first part. They didn't have a deep knowledge. Most had a knowledge of what they were doing. They just couldn't do it in the time that they were given to do it. And the and I don't want to blame this all on AMCs, but Dodd-Frank created a conundrum for the lending institutions. When I was with my company, we did 1,000 appraisals a month, and we had 4 or 5 people. And our charge was to make sure that we got credible appraisals from credible appraisers. And it was a situation where we wanted to make sure they came in a normal period of time, in a good period of time. But that was the concept. When you look at somebody like Wells Fargo, some of this, they were doing 20 times that in a month. And after Dodd-Frank went to Wells Fargo and says, by the way, there's got to be a firewall between who orders the appraisal, and the big banks just said our volume was way too much to do that. There was, and there became no physical way without AMCs. So were they necessary when they came in? And I there are electronic methods of distribution, but most lending institutions are going, we don't want any part of a $900 million fine for distributing our appraisals the wrong way. We would just as soon pass that off to somebody else. So is it a necessary, I don't want to say evil, is it a necessary function? And I look around today and I say, yeah, I think it is. I wish, uh, very frankly, I wish that AMCs would not take on the role of appraisers, which you see often. Your job is to be a firewall.
When you say you wish they wouldn't take on the job of appraisers, you mean that the reviewer gets back to the appraiser and said, you used the wrong comps, you should use these.
Correct. Yeah. Or you didn't bracket, or I'm sorry, your value is outside the norm, or the 7 or 8 points. At one point, there was a lender, and I won't mention who, used to send their stuff overseas to India with a list of okay, if you find these violations, please write this up and send it back, and we'll get back to the appraiser without any knowledge whatsoever, without reading the addendum that says the appraiser was unable to bracket the subject property for the following reasons, or the adjustment for condition is because. And that's what many appraisers still find today, is that you've taken on the job as something as more than just a firewall. And I was in and out of the appraisal management business in a couple of years when I realized that we were in front of a train, that the money to be made for distribution was beyond keeping uh, keeping uh, keeping going away from best practices, put it that way.
All right, let's examine another question. Now, our mutual friends, Brian Reynolds and Jeff Morley and Mark Barrett, recently addressed the topic of the sky is falling. Now, they were not convinced it was falling. I'm convinced that it's falling. I'm convinced that the bottom has pretty much dropped out of the real estate appraisal market. And we're going to see a 50% drop in the number of appraisal assignments. Therefore, we're going to see a concomitant drop in the number of appraisers necessary. Now, I'm talking obviously GSE appraisals. Okay, so yeah, I think the sky has fallen, and we may not know it yet. The detritus from the fall may not have hit yet, but it's getting real close, and that it's going to be really tough for some appraisers, especially probably new appraisers, to make a living. And some of us old guys are going to go, no, I've had enough. I've got. I was lucky enough to be in this business when it was great to be in, and I've made my money, and I'm getting out of it. So I'm going to take the position that not only is the sky falling, the sky has fallen, and the appraisal business is in deep doo-doo, and it's not going to get better anytime soon. Now, show me, if possible, pretend you're my wife. Tell me I'm wrong.
I won't go that far, but I will respectfully take, not the devil's advocate. Are there going to be fewer appraisals in the future? Yes. When Fannie Mae, and this was back 16, 17, when Fannie Mae decided they were going to start to retool, they started with the concept is, we don't need an appraisal on everything. The person with an 805 credit score with 20-year job time and a $900,000 retirement fund, has his house paid for and wants to borrow $50,000. We used to do appraisals on those, and you'd walk in the door, and the the borrower would go, "Yeah, I really don't know why you're here," and you'd have to apologize and say, "Well, it doesn't have to make sense if it's a policy." And those policies are changing. They are going to, and they said this 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. We are going to retool, and we are going to lend based on risk, which was the first shoe to drop, because all those appraisals that we were doing for that scenario are going to go away. But over that same 5 or 6 years, since 17, 18, we've been hit with so many different issues, with bias issues, with retooling, with everything. I don't disagree that there are going to be fewer appraisals done. I don't see the business growing like it did, for instance, 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, when we were 600 or 700 appraisals behind. You had a firm of 10 people. We had a firm of 5 people, and we were at one point in time 200 appraisals behind. And that's when, in the 2000s, when Fannie said, "Okay, we're going to design an exterior inspection form, and we'll do that for you." That's another story altogether. But we're going to get so. Am I disagreeing partially? Yeah, I think the sky, while it maybe hasn't fallen, it's lowered several thousand feet, to the point where, if you are going to work today, you're not going to work the same way you did in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And that's where we get into, and I'll take this a step further. 2 or 3 years ago, my grandson was either 10 or 11 years old, and he was going, I think, finishing grade school, elementary, and going into middle school. And he was talking about how it was going, and I, of course, went off. I was in the back seat, and I railed on how it was when I was there, and we didn't have to do that. And he literally turned around in his little seat and said, "Poppy." He called me Poppy. Said, "Poppy, you just got to learn to adapt. You just have to adapt." And I started to answer him until I finally realized, you're right. You're right. I'm not you. You have to adapt to it. For me, it's adapting. For him, it was something new. So the appraisers who came in after 07, 08 don't have a lot of adapting to do. They came in with a lot of the technology available today. Sorry, I'm going down a rabbit hole that doesn't necessarily answer your question, but I think we are going to end up with the appraisals. When I was with the mortgage company, Fannie Mae rates appraisals risk score 1 through 5. We only looked at the 5s. All the 5s got sent to the appraisal department, and as chief appraiser, it landed on my shoulders. So I think those are the kind of appraisals that we're going to end up doing. Are the ones where there is a not as good credit score. The property's rural in nature. It's an 88% loan to value ratio. So I don't disagree. I just think there's still room for the appraisers that are out there. Is it going to be a growing profession? I guess that remains to be seen.
Okay, let's talk about adapting. All right, the sky's fallen, and there's a 50% decrease in the number of appraisals needed, which means a whole lot of appraisers are going to get real busy, but they're going to be few appraisers who are going to get real busy. All right, so what are those appraisers who aren't getting that work? What are they going to do? You mentioned adapt. What are those appraisers going to have to adapt to doing? I mean, they're appraisers. There's no GSE work. What are they supposed to do? Adapt to working at McDonald's? I mean, what are they going to do?
Well, when I say adapt, I'm assuming that they're going to stay in the same profession. And to stay in the same profession, in order to adapt, you have to realize that the technology available today, such as group data, statistical analysis, adjusted pairs, importing comps, exporting your information from your MLS to Excel. All those things are available. And what Fannie Mae didn't know in 1980 and 90, they didn't have any of that information, and they didn't know that we had it. Now they know we have it, and they're going, why aren't you using this?
Well, let me stop you right there. Go through that group again.
And
Re-
these oh, go ahead. These are just technology terms,
Right. Go through them again.
okay, the analytical tools. And I just jotted a few down from the last webinar that I attended. Group data, statistical analysis, adjusted pairs, and then to learn what scatter plots are, and histograms, and box plots, and bar charts.
Oh,
Those
okay.
are all things that are being thrown at us.
Okay. Now, I contend they're not being thrown at us. I contend that that qualifying education is so horrendously poor, so dynamically lousy that we're still talking to appraisers about filling out forms instead of saying, okay, guys, don't even talk to a supervisor until you've got intermediate level Excel skills. And you can do all of this stuff because if you don't have intermediate level Excel skills, you can't appraise real estate because appraising real estate isn't filling out the damn form. It's the intellectual processes you have to go through to form a credible opinion of value. And we don't teach that.
No.
So, how are appraisers supposed to adapt to something we don't teach?
That's that's a pretty good devil's advocate position. And the second part, and this conversation is going to lead from the second A, and that's adopt. And it is, in order to adapt, you're going to have to adopt some form of understanding of how to back up, how to support your paired sales. And I don't, you and I will disagree on this. I don't believe that your average appraiser today should know how to run Excel and how to do pivot charts and all the things that takes. If in fact that is going to turn out to be true, we will probably end up with enough appraisers to do the lesser jobs than there are today, because with AI and the rest of the things, you can run it through a system and do what they do. But uh, adapting is understanding. Okay, I've got to learn how to understand these. And adopting, there are tools out there. There's Chat GPT. There's Aloft software, Synapse, Spark, Titan Analytics, DataMaster. NAR has a system that all do analytics. And as a use PAP instructor, you certainly know if I'm going to use analytics, it behooves me to know how they work. There is there's a Solomon system right now that bases adjustments off depreciated costs. That's a very easy simplification of it. But do I understand how it works, and do I believe that it's indicative of the market, are the two things that I would have to convince the state. When I'm in front of the state, do I understand the technologies that I used? And that's the adoption method. You're going to have to adopt. I think some form of that. You and I will probably forever disagree. Do I have to have a mathematical knowledge to know, for instance, what a histogram is, what it looks like? There are appraisers who do. Do I have to know that in order to be successful to work for Wells Fargo, for instance, to do an appraisal in 2 days? And then I would argue with you, I got to spend way too much money on education in order to do what I can make for this. The two don't work. and that's where I see the profession's pulling itself apart. And I don't have the answer to that. I don't know where it's going to end up.
Okay, you talked about adapt and adopt. Okay, so an appraiser adopts goes out and says, okay, I see that I have to adopt a much more extensive use of Excel or any spreadsheet program. And so the appraiser then adapts him or herself to that new paradigm. Okay. So what's the upside? What's the payday for the appraiser?
Very good question, because that's the second part of it. The appraiser's ability to execute clients' requests quickly, credibly, and on budget. And that's the part I said I don't have the answer to that. If that's the knowledge that's going to be required of an appraisal, can I afford to do an appraisal for $275 in 48 hours and turn it in and defend it to the state? And I'm not sure that those three paired together match that will be able to happen. So I don't have I don't have the answer to that, and that's it is one of my favorite expressions is progress is not always forward. What is called progress is decided by history as to whether it's progress or not. Is this progress? Is it progress requiring that the appraiser have the knowledge and mathematical ability to be able to complete any one of the scatter plots or histograms or do statistical analysis in the time span that the market is expecting him or her to do it in? And I'm not sure that will find its market, because if the market, if that's what FHFA and Fannie Mae is now requiring, they might find that 3/4 of the people out there can't do this for what is being paid for the analysis. And at that point, maybe the industry, or the lending industry is looking for something that's going to be provided by ATMs. I was watching every now and then. Because I'm involved with the professional standards committee, so I look at Facebook every now and then, and there was a statement, and maybe it wasn't on Facebook. It says something to the effect that in either 5 years or 10 years, bots will take care of everything as far as lending is concerned. They will do everything. And my only comment to that, and I unfortunately posted it, I couldn't help it, was that as long as quote unquote bots can stand for the $14.5 trillion of mortgages that are out there, and so the American taxpayers don't have to, then okay, let's do that. And the second thing I say is bots don't buy houses. People pay for a pool, one thing in Florida and one thing in Michigan. The hurricane just 2 hurricanes just went through Florida. Our value is gonna suffer for it. The boots on the ground, the man and woman of appraisers are going to be able to see that much quicker than a bot is going to be able to. So progress is not always forward, and some of it's progress, some of it isn't. Just to give you an idea, to frame what we were talking about, to be able to adapt, and here's some examples. Netflix, if we remember Netflix, they started by mailing CDs to people. That's how they started. They adapted into the digital world and ended up with a TV station. Apple started out one way, started out basically with focusing on what they called niche markets. They're huge today. So it goes on and on as far as adapting. And the last thing that I'll say, and I'm going to steal this from the I'll steal this from the webinar that we both watched yesterday that Brian did, and it's Charles Darwin, and it says it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent. It's the one that is most adaptable. So if you have the tools to adapt to the market that we're changing, obviously the first thing you have to do is to figure out how it's changing. What is it you want from me, and can I do it for the price? And right now, Tim, I see it as we have entities out there asking for, and no disrespect to Walmart, asking for Walmart prices. And we have a client to say, no, we would rather have Hudson's quality. And somewhere in between there lies the truth. The biggest problem that we have is the American taxpayers will pay for the 14.5 trillion if something goes south. I'm sorry, I went down a big rabbit hole, but I will be quiet for a while.
Oh, we're friends. You get to do that. Well, you quoted Darwin. I want to quote Lieutenant Ellen Louise Ripley, warrant officer, who said, "It's a queen. She'll breed. You'll die." And you and I have different outlooks on this, but Marty, thank you. I appreciate you sharing yours with us, and I appreciate you letting me rant. I'm pretty good at that. You're very patient and kind, and sometimes I can be otherwise. But anyway, we're going to wrap this up. Thanks everybody for watching. We surely appreciate it. Marty, if somebody needed to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
They would do that. My email address is marty@WAGARappraisals.com. And that's WAGAR. The common mistake is I should have another email address. It says WAGER, but it's not that. It's WAGARappraisals.com. Thanks for asking, Tim.
We'll have that on the screen. And if you need to get in touch with me, Tim at theappraisersadvocate.com. So send Marty the hate mail, send me the checks. So
That's
thanks.
right.
We appreciate it. So until next time, thanks for watching. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.